Welcome to the Coastal Gardener November edition. Hope your fall is going well so far. As always, we've got lots of things going on the show this time. We've got some garden tips for you, some interesting azaleas and some other plants that you might want to plant this time of year. And we're going to finish up the show with Chantel Welker and a pumpkin soup. But before we get started on planting, because fall is for planting, we've got a bug update for you. Actually, kudzu bug. You may remember we talked about these back in April. This is a little shield bug, kind of brown looking, that just got all over our wisteria, bothers beans and peas and lots of different plants. Also attacks soybeans if you're a farmer out in the rural areas. But right now, the kudzu bug is back. We've had some people bringing them in, wondering what they are, what to do about them. One of the things that's happening, and especially if you live out in the rural areas, as the soybean crop dries down and the guys begin to harvest, the kudzu bugs that have been feeding on the soybeans move from there to other hosts. Of course, beans and peas are one of them, but wisteria is one that we've had problems with. Sometimes they're just congregating around windows and doors and becoming a real nuisance to people. What are you going to do about kudzu bug? There really isn't much you can do. You can kill the ones you contact with an insecticide, but you're not going to be able to do anything with any kind of residual or treating a surface. It really doesn't work particularly well. If they're coming in the house, you can suck them up into a vacuum cleaner or something like that. The good news is they should be gone by the end of this month. So you'll have a little bit of a period of time where they really will be a nuisance. They're not going to hurt anything other than being a nuisance. But hopefully by the end of November, you won't have any more problems with kudzu bug, and maybe we'll get lucky next spring and they're not much of a problem. Well, one thing we always talk about in the fall, of course, is in our mild climate, this is a great time to plant. Now, if you've just moved here from a colder climate, that may seem a little strange to you, but our soils never really freeze. We get root growth throughout the winter, and that means if you plant now, especially with trees and shrubs and even herbaceous perennials, your plants will be much better established because they'll have all that time to grow roots, get established, get ready for the coming spring and summer next year. Much better than if you plant in the spring when you've got a brand new plant that's trying to grow roots and also trying to grow top growth leaves and foliage. So fall is a great time to plant, and one of the groups of plants that we talk a lot about here, because it's a very important group of plants to our landscapes, are the evergreen azaleas. Now, if you haven't been hiding under a rock somewhere, if you can find one in eastern North Carolina, you know that the big thing about azaleas has been the reblooming ones, the encores, 20-some different varieties of plants that bloom at least a couple of seasons a year, spring and fall, some even kind of sporadically through the winter. Greenleaf Nursery has come out with the Bloomathon series, and we've been playing with these for a couple of years now. There's 4 varieties in that series right now, with 3 or 4 more due to be released this coming spring. But this is a good group of plants. They were selected down in South Carolina, Seneca, South Carolina, so they're pretty well adapted to our climate. Like I said, we've been playing with them, and we've got some examples of them here. Probably the one that's done the best for us so far in the times we've had them here in the Arboretum is this one that's right close to me here, the one they call lavender. Now, you can argue whether that's really a lavender bloom or not, but this plant holds its foliage well, seems to tolerate adverse conditions pretty well for an azalea, and it does bloom at least 3 seasons, and that's what they're touting. They also have a white version that you can see here. They have a double pink and a red, the red one we have over there. All of these Bloomathons, as I said, came from Greenleaf Nursery. They are available in the trade, but they'll be much more available this coming spring. So you will see these plants now. They haven't really been available until about right now. So if you haven't seen them before, that's a good reason. They haven't been out there and available very readily. But we've been playing with them, as I said, in the Arboretum in the garden here, and all of them seem to be pretty good plants. Remember, with any azalea, we always talk about bright light but not direct sun, high organic matter acid soils, good drainage. All of that applies to Bloomathons, it applies to encores, applies to just about any azalea. But one of the most exciting things in the azalea world that we've been having a little fun with lately is a group from Louisiana. So a guy named Richard Odom down there has come up with what he calls the Crimson series, and you see the one he named Crimson Queen here. These plants were selected from southern indicas with ones that had a lot of anthocyanin. That's what gives you the burgundy red color in plants. And he kept selecting and selecting and selecting until he came up with 3 varieties in different sizes that pretty much keep this burgundy foliage year round. Now, we've had these in the garden this past year, and they do fade a little bit in the heat of the summer, but as you can see, the new growth on these, an excellent color, almost looks Loropetalum-like. And if you're looking for something that gives you some blooms, although the blooms are not the greatest in the world, typical of a southern indica like Formosa, but look at that foliage, nice size, 3 different sizes. He's got a new one coming this coming year that'll be patented. So probably the most interesting thing that I've seen in the evergreen azalea world in recent times is this Crimson series from Louisiana. Now, this should be a good group of plants for us because it is a selection of southern indica, and they're some of the toughest, easiest azaleas to grow if there's such a thing. One other plant that we know and love a lot here, we have a lot of them in the garden here at the Arboretum, are Japanese maples. And you know, there are hundreds of different Japanese maples. This is a selection called Bihu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a lot like Sango Keiko that you may know as coral bark Japanese maple. But you can see from this one that instead of being kind of a rosy pinky red, it's much more orange and yellow. And about the same size, 15 feet or so with a 10-foot spread. But just a reminder on Japanese maples, they don't need to be in dense shade. A lot of people think they need to be in dense shade. They will not do well, they will not color well in lots of shade. They do need good drainage, moist soil, so you're going to have to irrigate them. During the heat of the summer, you're going to have to help them out a little bit. And we are right on the edge of their adaptability. So go a little further south, you don't see a lot of Japanese maples used, but a wonderful group of plants, great color. A lot of them have great fall color. Many of them have wonderful form, looks great with landscape lighting in the wintertime. So even if they give you a little bit of trouble that you have to deal with the leaf scorch and all of that, the Japanese maples are just such a wonderful group of ornamental trees. You just got to put them in the landscape, even here in southeastern North Carolina. So evergreen azaleas, a common group of plants, but some uncommon varieties here. And Japanese maples, always some beautiful plants to add to the landscape. Hope that gets you started on that fall planting project. Stick with us, we'll be back in just a few moments.
What we do to the planet, we do to ourselves. You can help keep America beautiful. Visit KAB.org.
Welcome back to the show. We will have a treat for you. We have Matt Martin, who's kind of our turf expert. He's not kind of, he is our turf expert here on the Coastal Gardener. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Al.
You know, we bring you on here periodically and you tell us a lot about things that are going on, mostly for home lawns, because most of our viewers are homeowners, home gardeners. But I don't think we've ever really completely explained what you do and how that ties in with the Arboretum and Extension and all of that. So give us the Cliff's Notes version of what goes on with that.
Well, Al, you know, I've been working in the area for almost 18 years now, and my job really is kind of a mixed role of what we call extension, which is teaching in the field basically, and research work, and I split that about half and half. One of the biggest jobs is to help people who have problems, whether it's with a lawn, whether it's a DOT, a golf course, a lot of different aspects where we grow turf and might run into problems or need advice on a particular thing they want to do. So that's my role as extension. The other role is working with research. I guess they would be projects that we look at, you know, different coastal issues we have with turf grass. That might be with pest and pesticide related. It might be with water quality. We've done a lot of that in the past, looking at water quality and how nutrients and fertilizers might impact water quality. A lot of my job involves, you know, working with companies that want to look at a particular product and compare that maybe to something on the market. Maybe it's a product they want to bring on the market in a few years. And, you know, that really is a role that a land grant institution like NC State provides. And all 50 states have a land grant institution, but we provide a research link where a company can come to us and we research a product as an independent screener basically, and provide them the data, and they can use that in their promotion or whatever they want to do with that type of product.
And of course, here at the Arboretum, the garden here is one of the 101 cooperative extension offices that are in the state of North Carolina. But you mentioned that you spend a lot of time with research and with extension looking at problems, and I think you've been working on some nematode stuff, and I'm not sure everybody knows what a nematode is. A nematode is a microscopic parasitic roundworm, I guess in the same family as earthworms, of same family of critters. But we do have a lot of different nematodes that are problematic, unfortunately, I guess, for us here. But you've been doing a good bit of work with nematodes on turf in the last couple of years, haven't you?
Yeah, because of the geographic region we're in the state, this is a good area to do a lot of nematode research. We did a big collaborative study with Clemson last year and our nematode assay screening office and NC State, looking at nematode populations throughout the Carolinas. And we actually found new nematode species that were previously unknown. There's very little known about nematodes. And we'll put a picture up because we can't hold one in our hand because they're microscopic. And but you're exactly right. They parasitize the roots of plants, and their problems from horticultural plants to vegetable plants to, you know, turf.
We have loads of them here on the Arboretum garden. We have lots of root knot in a lot of our gardens here, but obviously root knot's not so much of a problem on turf. But as you mentioned, they attack the root system, so the plant looks like it needs water, looks like it needs fertilizer, looks sick, and eventually may die because the roots aren't functional. But tell us a little bit about the specifics of what you found with some of the nematode work you've been doing.
Well, one thing we found is, you know, again, new species. We find nematodes basically in both states from 3,000 foot elevation all the way to the coast. The species dynamics change a little bit, but the reality is in most of the sandier soils and lighter soils in the state, we find nematodes, and even some in the clay soils. And like you say, what they do is they feed on the roots of the plant. They don't allow the plant to take up nutrients nearly as efficiently, and so for the same input, you don't get the same output from the plant as you might expect, or you might get in areas where you don't have that nematode feeding. And you're right, probably, you know, there's no guess in how many, but a lot of people in this region deal with nematodes in their lawn, or like you say, in their landscape, and they're completely unaware of it.
Well, and that brings up a good question. If you see something like that and you say, well, I don't know if that's a nematode problem or not, how would you go about determining that you really did have one?
Well, one, we'll talk about sampling here in just a second, where we can sample. You know, the first signs on plants that you have nematodes would be droughty symptoms, when you should have ample soil moisture a lot of times. Because the nematodes feeding on the root, it doesn't have that ability to take up water like it should. So if you have a suspected area in turf, we a lot of times see the turf thin, not as vigorous as areas where you might have, but not making a patch like a disease might make, or very quick damage like an invading insect might make. Because they live in the soil all the time, as soon as you put grass down or put seed or sod down, they're going to start immediately feeding on the roots as soon as they start growing.
Right.
So what you can do is you can take an assay, which is basically a sample of your nematodes in your area, or in your, whether it's in your lawn, whether it's in your garden. It's basically like a large soil sample. You don't want to go to the areas where your plants are dead, though. You want to go in areas surrounding those where, on the edges of where you suspect the damage. This is a quart-size Ziploc bag, and we've just about filled it to the top. As a matter of fact, that may not be quite full enough. The best thing to take it with is some type of probe like this, but if you don't have a probe, something stainless steel, you don't want to use something that'll have rust on it. That's going to affect soil samples even more, but you're better off to take more samples than 1 or 2 small samples.
Right.
So use something like this, a probe. To fill this bag with this probe, it took about 25 of these cores. And I only sampled about 6 inches deep, about to the depth of the roots. I didn't probe the full depth of this probe because that'll give you a real false reading. You really only want to focus in, probably with turf, the 4 to 6 inch range, and ornamental plants, I know you'd probably go deeper, however deep the root zone is. Yes.
It's where the roots are.
Yeah, where the roots are.
Boils down to
And then there's a box, you'll fill that in, send it in, costs $3.
bargain of the century.
The thing to remember about a nematode assay is it's going to indicate a presence of nematodes that day, and you may or may not have that number tomorrow when you sample.
Right.
So you want to take that sample and make a judgment that you have nematodes, and then what do I do about it?
And in any of the cooperative extension offices here at the Arboretum in Wilmington, Bolivia with Brunswick County, obviously any of the cooperative extension offices can help you with getting the proper paperwork filled out and getting it sent in to Raleigh, because all these are done, of course, at the lab in Raleigh.
Right.
But, so if we determine that we do have a legitimate nematode problem, whether it's sting nematode or some of the others that attack turf or root knot on some of the vegetables or ornamentals or whatever, what are we going to do about it?
Well, the first thing you got to think about is protecting the roots. So anything that is going to make roots not grow, you don't want to do. In most cases, the things that are going to help your plants are more water, more fertilizer, and then if there is an available type of treatment you can use, you might consider treating the nematode as well. Herbicides will affect your plant roots, so you have to pay attention to types of weed killers you use over the top of your turf. The thing with nematodes that has always been true for the most part is that we used chemicals that came from agriculture, and most of them had periods where after we treated we couldn't go back in that area. So there were never any available for a home lawn. You could use them on a golf course, a sod farm, somewhere else. Only recently have we come up or have we seen data from a biological nematicide that shows a little bit of promise, not in controlling the nematodes so much, but in helping the turf grow better, basically. That product is called Nordica, and it can be applied in a home lawn. You apply it in October, November time frame in this region, and then again in April. It can be used for nematode control with a moderate amount of success that we've seen in some, research data, which is better than we've really ever seen with most of the biological products that are out there.
Well, that's great news, because bottom line, until Nordica, in the recent times, there hadn't been anything. So it's kind of like dealing with ground pearls or some of the others. You say grow the plant better, and that's all you can do. That's pretty tough for a lot of people to take.
That's right. That's right. And this product, it doesn't control the nematodes. It's a fungus that protects the roots, that really inhibits the feeding of the nematodes on the plant. So even if you sample and your numbers are high and you put this product out, your numbers are still going to be high.
Right.
You're going to make your basis really on improving the health of the turf.
Right.
And that's going to be aided by putting out more fertilizer in times, putting out more water at times when the plants are droughty, and keeping them from getting droughty.
And of course in vegetables and some of the other things, there are plant varieties that are resistant. That's
Right.
obviously one of the things you can do, not so much in turf, but
That's right.
certainly in some of the, you can get tomatoes and you can get some other plants that are fairly resistant to nematode attack.
Ironically, the one that shows the most resistance to nematodes in this area, and for the nematodes that really feed on turf, is centipede. Grasses like Bermuda grass and zoysia grass, because of the number of roots they make, and just maybe they're more susceptible, they like the taste of the roots better, that's where we see higher counts. Grasses like centipede are a lot of times where we see our lower counts of nematodes.
Well, that's another good reason to grow
There you
centipede
go.
grass, I guess.
There you go.
Well, Matt, a lot of information about nematodes, a frustrating problem for a lot of people when they're dealing with it. But if we have a problem or suspect a problem, what do you recommend?
You know, the first thing is figure out who your extension agent is in your county, so that they can help you with this interpretation of your samples. They can give you the supplies that you need. Again, it's something that we struggle with as professionals, trying to make judgments on. Are they problems? Are they not problems at times? They can help you a lot in your long-term success with nematodes. And then, just like you say, with varieties of plants that might be not as susceptible to the feeding activity.
So it's a multifaceted approach to dealing with nematodes, but the first thing to do, of course, is to get the sample and know for sure that you've got it. We don't
That's right.
need to do the shade tree mechanic approach and start throwing things at it. So.
That's right.
But anyway, all of us can be glad to help you with that. Well, Matt, thanks for joining us here on the show. That's Matt Martin. He's our turf guy here in the eastern part of the state, working out of the crop science department at NC State. We go from nematodes to pumpkins. We're going to join Chantel Welker as she tries to pick out the perfect pumpkin.